This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. 3 years into our marriage, my wife had an affair. When I found out, she wasn't even bothered. She just said I was still the one she loved the most, and the affair was out of curiosity and a desire for something new. Until one day, she discovered that I had cheated, too. She broke down in tears, her eyes bloodshot, gripping my arm tightly, refusing to let me leave. "This isn't real. I'm still the one you love most, right?" I brushed her hand away. "Sorry, I've truly fallen for someone else." When I saw a faint red mark above my wife Haley's snow-white chest, my passion was instantly extinguished as if doused in cold water. I straightened up and Haley, still panting, asked, "What's wrong?" I pointed at the mark that looked like a kiss and asked her, "What's this?" Haley sat up, glanced down. "What? Oh, this? I must have scrubbed too hard while showering." Under the warm yellow light, Haley's expression was completely natural. She teased me, scratching my nose. "Are you suspecting I'm fooling around with other men? You jealous fool. I love you the most. How could I possibly flirt with anyone else? It's just a finger mark." I frowned. It wasn't that I was overly sensitive or small-minded, but in the past year or two, my company had been growing rapidly. To seize the opportunity for funding and going public, I'd spent an entire year flying all over the country, meeting investors. I'd been home for less than a month in total that whole year. Once, during a business dinner, a director from a venture capital firm joked with me, "Boss Rocky, you're working too hard. If you're away this often, be careful that your lovely wife at home doesn't get too restless and stray. You should take some time to go back home and rest." At the time, I just laughed it off, but in the past few months, I'd noticed that Haley was texting me much less frequently. Sometimes when I called, she'd hang up after just a few words, which made me start to have doubts. Haley and I had been together since high school, dating and marriage combined, over 10 years now. I knew her temperament and personality all too well. She was very dependent on me and placed great importance on my timely responses to her. When we were dating, if I didn't reply to her within half an hour, she'd start to worry that I was annoyed with her, and then we'd argue. To give Haley a sense of security, I made all my social media accounts accessible to her, always reporting where I was and what I was doing. She would regularly check my contacts and WeChat friends, seeing which women I was in touch with and how frequently, knowing everything clearly. Because Haley had been so strict with me before, I immediately noticed when she started acting a little distant. Haley adjusted her loosened nightgown, covering up that glaring red mark. Although her tone had been quite natural, claiming it was just a finger mark, I wasn't a fool. I could still tell the difference between a kiss mark and a finger mark. Haley was quietly watching my expression from the side. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. After a long silence, I reached out my hand. "Give me your phone." She froze, her eyes shifting. "Huh? Your phone? Give it to me so I can take a look." Haley's body stiffened slightly. She sat on the bed, not moving for a moment. I saw her phone on the nightstand and leaned over to grab it. Seeing this, Haley suddenly snapped out of it and, just before my hand touched the phone, rushed to grab it and hid it behind her back. If I had only been suspicious after seeing the red mark, her panicked reaction now confirmed without a doubt that something was wrong. Haley clearly realized how guilty she looked, and her pale face flushed red. "Rocky, hand it over." Haley's round almond eyes quickly filled with tears. "Rocky, I really don't have anything to hide." "Then why are you so nervous if I just want to check your phone? If there's nothing, why are you feeling guilty?" She continued to stare at me, but I remained unmoved, staring back with a stern expression. Seeing that her tears weren't swaying me, Haley sniffled. "What exactly are you being paranoid about? This mark?" She pulled open her collar again and rubbed that spot hard with her fingers. "I already told you. I don't know where it came from. Maybe I scrubbed too hard while showering. Look, it's red now, isn't it?" Her pale skin turned bright red from the harsh rubbing. That glaring kiss mark was indeed hidden within the reddened area, now less obvious. "Why are you being so paranoid? If you really suspect me, then stop treating this home like a hotel and stay here with me every day. Was it me who made you travel all over the country? Was it me who made you come home only a few times a year? How could you doubt me?" Her emotions suddenly flared up, loudly accusing me. It was as if she was truly innocent, and I was the one being unreasonable, petty. But if only she wasn't still tightly gripping her phone, hiding it behind her back, her defense might have seemed more flawless. That short yet seemingly endless standoff ended with me moving to the guest room. I didn't sleep all night and went to work early the next morning. Although a pile of work awaited me, my head was throbbing, and all I could think about was the red mark on Haley's chest. The entire morning, my efficiency was terrible, and I kept zoning out during meetings. After my assistant reminded me for the third time, I sighed. Let's end the meeting here today. We'll discuss the rest tomorrow. Everyone's been working hard lately, so go home early and get some rest. For the first time, I left work early while it was still bright outside and returned home. As soon as I walked in, I noticed the bedroom door was ajar, and I could hear Haley talking on the phone with her best friend. You don't know, when he tried to take my phone, I thought I was caught for real. Luckily, I grabbed it just in time and hid it. TSK, you're really daring. What did your husband say? Haley chuckled. What could he say? I fooled him. In the end, I scolded him, and then he went off to sleep in the guest room. When I woke up this morning, he was already off to work. He wasn't that mad after all. Her friend cautioned. Haley, maybe you should stop pushing it. Your husband's a good guy. You should be careful. What if he can't forgive you and wants a divorce? Quietly, I walked closer to the bedroom. Through the crack in the door, I saw Haley sitting at her vanity, casually humming while applying makeup. Divorce? Don't be ridiculous. You know how much Rocky loves me. He wouldn't leave me unless I asked for it. And besides, he's so busy with work, he's barely been home for more than a month all year. I'm lonely. What's wrong with finding a little comfort elsewhere? Honestly, my cheating isn't all my fault. If he could stay home with me every day, would I have looked for other men? And anyway, I'm about to meet up with him later to end things. Her friend gasped. Wow, you're really bold. Aren't you afraid Rocky will find out and confront you? At that moment, I felt as if a giant hand was squeezing my heart, making it impossible to breathe. I've been working so hard, giving Haley a life of comfort, so she could always empty her shopping cart and never need to work a stressful job under a boss. And in the end, she blames me for her cheating, even getting all dressed up to meet her lover. Her friend advised her to stop meeting the guy and block his number before I found out, and everything backfired. But Haley nonchalantly checked her eyeliner in a small mirror. He won't find out. Even if he does, all I need to do is cry and beg. He loves me so much, he'll definitely forgive me. I know Rocky too well. He couldn't live without me. And besides, it's not like I'm emotionally cheating and in love with another man. Why would he take it so seriously? She put down the mirror, her eyes shifting back to the vanity mirror, and in that moment, our eyes met. Her words came to an abrupt halt, and the hand holding her eyeliner froze. Haley, why aren't you talking? Her friend on the phone sensed something was wrong. Haley quickly stood up, hanging up the phone. Her half-made-up face turned pale. She forced a smile. Why are you home so early? You said I wouldn't divorce you? We spoke at the same time, and Haley froze. You're really overthinking. In this world, no one is irreplaceable. I didn't ask her who the man was, nor did I yell or scream. Instead, Haley panicked. Rocky, what are you saying? We're not getting divorced. She followed me to the study, pleading, I didn't do anything. Rocky, listen to me. I stopped walking and turned to face her. All right, I'm listening to your explanation. What I did was wrong, but it takes two to tango. I didn't want this either. From Haley's stuttering explanation, I learned that she had been cheating since last year, and not just with one person. And of course, she blamed me. She said I knew she was someone who needed constant companionship, yet I still left her alone for long periods due to work. So, she couldn't be blamed for going to bars and clubs out of boredom. She said she was merely curious at first, only looking for novelty, flirting with those men without any real feelings or physical involvement. Her true love was still me. She said there was just one time when she crossed the line with a college student, but nothing happened after that. So, she considered herself still innocent. She also said that we'd been together for more than 10 years. Our lives intertwined for at least a third of our lives, so divorce wasn't an option. She promised she would stop and never speak to another man again. The gist of her argument was that, yes, she was wrong, but I hadn't been perfect either. I should forgive her this once. Throughout her confession, Haley was tearful and choked up, her pitiful appearance tugging at my heart. But this time, it wasn't out of sympathy. Instead, I kept recalling her casual words earlier. All I need to do is cry and beg. He loves me so much, he'll definitely forgive me. See, she knew I had hurt her, yet she was still using that same tactic against me. Haley had grown confident, believing that I would always soften to her rehearsed apologies and eventually forgive her. After years of pampering her, I had made her look down on me. She thought I could even endure the humiliation of being cheated on. I didn't want to say much more. I printed out divorce papers and handed them to her. I'm going on a business trip for a month. During this time, think it over. When I return, I hope to see your signature on the divorce agreement. Haley looked at the papers in disbelief. You really want a divorce? Just because of this? If not, should I just keep letting you cheat on me? My words made Haley's body tremble, her face turning pale. But I already already said I was wrong. Rocky, you love me so much. Can't you forgive me just once? I didn't know you'd react so strongly. This time, her tears were real, but I no longer cared whether they were sincere or fake. Haley, you don't know me as well as you think. No man can tolerate being cheated on. I forced the divorce papers into her hand. Haley tore them to shreds. No, I won't divorce you. This isn't that big of a deal. Rocky, think it over. We've been together for more than 10 years. How can you just remove me from your life so easily? Looking at the torn papers scattered on the floor, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. Tearing them up won't change anything. I want a divorce, and you can't stop it. I was determined to get a divorce, but Haley was just as determined not to let it happen. After that day, I packed my bags and flew to Washington, thousands of miles away, to work on a project. Haley started calling and texting me incessantly. At first, she apologized tearfully with a low profile, but when she realized I wasn't swayed, she became angry. She thought I was blowing things out of proportion. She said she couldn't understand why. When none of those men outside were disrupting our life, I insisted on ruining everything, making it uncomfortable for us both. When I didn't respond, she screamed hysterically on the other end of the phone. You always do this. I'd rather you yell at me properly, instead of making me play this one-sided drama. But I honestly didn't know what to say. Am I supposed to throw a tantrum, smash up the house, and grab her by the neck, demanding to know who her damn lovers were, how many there were, so she'd find it interesting? Or should I sink into jealousy, refusing to eat or sleep, all because she cheated on me? What man fears being without a wife? I told myself this, but at a business dinner hosted by our partners, I somehow ended up getting drunk. When I woke up the next morning, I found a woman lying beside me. I lifted the covers and glanced at my bare upper body, feeling a sinking dread. Did I really get drunk and lose control? But I didn't feel anything. Was this a setup? As I was still in a daze, the woman beside me turned over and looked at me for 2 seconds. We both screamed. To make things worse, the doorbell rang. The person outside seemed determined to get me up, pressing the bell continuously, then pounding on the door when I didn't respond. Rocky, open the door. It was Haley's voice. I frowned, glanced at the confused young woman in my bed, and quickly got dressed. She too lifted the covers, revealing that her clothes were still intact. I sighed in relief. It seemed like nothing had happened between us. I quickly said to her, help me out. The person at the door is my soon-to-be ex-wife. If you play along, I'll reward you afterward. The young woman's expression changed from confusion to contempt. Scumbag. I didn't have time to explain. I know it's unfair, but if you leave now with my wife at the door, it'll be impossible to explain. Please. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded. I opened the door. Haley rushed in immediately. Since I wasn't staying in an executive suite, Haley quickly spotted the young woman, standing awkwardly in the middle of the room. Haley froze in place. She looked at me, then at the young woman, before asking in disbelief, who is she? I came all the way here to surprise you, and you're in a hotel room with another woman? The young woman, seeing Haley on the verge of breaking down, couldn't help but want to explain. Quickly walked over, wrapped my arm around her shoulders, and whispered, remember to cooperate. Then I turned to Haley, speaking in the coldest tone possible. As you can see, I cheated. Haley's face turned pale, her lips losing all color. You, Rocky, you. I don't believe it. Her voice trembled, her eyes red, tears falling in large drops. I don't believe it. This isn't real, right? I'm still the one you love the most, right? I found it particularly ridiculous. It seemed she couldn't understand the pain unless the knife was in her own heart. Look at her now, so different from just days ago, when she felt entitled to my forgiveness for her affair. Haley rushed over and pushed the young woman away, clinging tightly to my hand. Let go of him. The young woman stumbled, almost falling, but I quickly shoved Haley away and helped the young woman up. I stepped between them, separating Haley from the young woman. After all, she was just a last-minute accomplice, and I didn't want things to get out of hand. Haley broke down. She covered her face and let out a scream. This isn't real. Rocky, you couldn't have cheated. You still love me the most, right? I looked coldly at Haley. Stop acting crazy. Have you signed the divorce papers yet? Haley shook her head. No, I won't sign. I won't divorce you. Rocky, please don't do this to me. She glanced at the woman behind me, her eyes filled with pain and restraint. It's all my fault. This time, let's just call it even, okay? Seeing Haley so willing to humble herself, I suddenly felt like laughing. Did she really think that if I cheated once too, it would cancel out her mistakes? Sorry, but I've truly fallen for someone else. Haley stood there, stunned. So please, sign the divorce papers soon. I don't want the person I love now to suffer. With that, I left the hotel room with the young young woman. In the elevator, I stared at the constantly flickering floor numbers, while the young woman beside me secretly studied me. After a while, she spoke up. Why are you getting a divorce? She seems to love you a lot. Love? I scoffed and retorted, how did you end up in my room? The young woman choked on her words. And who are you? Just then, the elevator doors opened, and Bame, the boss of the company that invited me to dinner last night, was standing at the entrance. Serena, where did you run off to last night? He didn't notice me and focused his gaze directly on the young woman beside me. Serena stuck her tongue out at me, muttering scumbag, before calling out cheerfully to Bame, brother, I'm so tired. Please take me home. Bame looked a bit puzzled, smiled apologetically at me, and then left with her. I went alone to the outdoor restaurant on the second floor of the hotel, sitting there lost in thought, trying to sober up. After a long while, someone sat down in front of me. Looking up, it was Haley. She hadn't left. Her eyes were red and swollen. I guess she had spent a long time crying in her room alone. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse and shaky. Rocky, when did you start seeing her? I can't believe you moved on so quickly. I leaned back in my chair. Now you want to pin the blame on me to claim more assets? She bit her lip and stared at me stubbornly. You tell me how long you've been with her. Is it just her, or is there more? I sneered. I'm not like you. I don't fool around with multiple women. I think it's filthy. Haley trembled at my use of the word filthy, and despair crept into her eyes. I only played around with them. It wasn't serious. But you, how could you really fall for someone else? That woman was just a plaything you found for me, right? She clearly doesn't know you. I was tired of this conversation and cut her off. I only want to talk about the divorce now. If you don't want to, then just leave. Haley had never seen me this cold, and she seemed utterly lost. After a long pause, she hesitantly said, okay, I can sign the divorce papers, but what about the house we live in? No problem, you can have it. The marital home was something I bought for her anyway. She chose the location, and she oversaw the decor and furniture. The place was filled with her memories, and living there was irritating. I could just give it to her. But the savings? I looked up at her. Don't be too greedy. The divorce agreement stated I was willing to give her $500,000. Maybe she thought that as the CEO of a company, $500,000 was too little and wanted more. Haley hesitated. I don't have a job. Exactly. So I've been working hard, trying to earn more to support you, and in the end, you enjoy my support, but turn around and flirt with countless men. When I find out, you flip the blame, saying I didn't come home, giving you the chance to cheat. Haley's face turned red, and she was speechless. Maybe Haley finally realized that her affair crossed my bottom line, and I wouldn't soften toward her again. After returning home, she quickly signed the divorce agreement and asked to set a date to finalize the divorce. I wanted to go back immediately, but a problem arose with the project here. The partners suddenly wanted to terminate the collaboration. I called Bame, but his assistant answered. She told me Bame was on a business trip, and the project would have to wait until he returned. I waited in Washington for a week, but the assistant's excuses were all the same, and I realized they were intentionally trying to breach the contract. Although my company wasn't as big as theirs, this project was a key focus for my company this year, but I had my pride. Every time I requested to meet Bame, his assistant turned me down, and I got angry. Fine, please tell Bame that his company is the one breaching the contract first, and the penalty will be according to the contract. If there are any objections, we'll go through the normal legal process. That night, I packed my bags and left Washington. After resting for a week in New York, I arranged to meet Haley at the Civil Affairs Bureau. We had agreed to meet at 9, but by 10, she still hadn't shown up. Perhaps waiting for Bame took too long, and now Haley was wasting my time. I was furious. I called Haley. Where the hell are you? Didn't we agree to meet at 9 to get the certificate? Haley was silent on the other end for a long while, before finally replying with a sobbing tone. My parents are here. Rocky, can you go home for a bit? I took a deep breath, hung up, and headed home. However, when I arrived at the entrance of my community, I was blocked by a young man. He looked like he was in his early 20s, with the fresh vitality that hadn't yet been beaten out of him by society. I stopped and frowned at this kid. He looked at me with hostility. You're Haley's husband, right? If you're a man, hurry up and divorce her. Don't keep dragging her down. Seeing this young punk, I had a vague idea of why Haley hadn't shown up at the Civil Affairs Bureau. I casually asked a few questions, and from the boy, I pieced together what had happened. It turned out that after I left for my business trip, Haley had cut off contact with all the men she was flirting with. This boy was a college student with whom she had once had an affair, and he was unable to find Haley, so he was hanging around the community every day. When Haley returned from Washington, she was emotionally drained and in pain. Unable to cope with her negative emotions, she ran into this young man waiting downstairs stairs. They met, and she broke down, crying on him to release all her pent-up feelings. Naturally, they ended up back together. Since I had been in Washington, this young man had been cohabiting with Haley for the past half a month. Meanwhile, my parents had just returned from their trip, planning to bring us some local specialties, but instead found Haley and this young man sleeping together in my house. My parents were furious and called Haley's parents over. Now, the young man had been kicked out, and Haley was left at home to face judgment. The young man, worried about Haley, had been lingering downstairs, refusing to leave. Now that he saw me, he started to provoke me with sarcasm. I didn't take this punk seriously at all. I whispered a few words to him, then walked past him upstairs. As soon as I entered the door, I saw Haley kneeling in front of 4 elders. There were obvious handprint marks on her face, which must have been from her parents. As soon as I walked in, my mom couldn't hold back anymore. "What are you two doing? Haley said you cheated too. Is that true?" I glanced at Haley, who was kneeling on the ground with her head down, too ashamed to look at me, and sneered. How could she do wrong and then turn it around on me? I truly looked down on her. I couldn't be bothered to cover for her, so I said straightforwardly, "Since both parents are here, I don't know what Haley told you, so I'll just say this. Since last year, Haley has been flirting with multiple men and even slept with a college student, the one you caught this morning." Haley's parents' faces suddenly changed. "Rocky, that's not how it works. Didn't you also have a woman on the side?" "Even if I did, it was after Haley cheated. Why can she mess around with other men, but I can't have relationships with other women?" My dad slammed the table, angrily reprimanding me. "Nonsense. This isn't nonsense. We already agreed to divorce half a month ago. Today we were supposed to handle the divorce procedures. The plan was to sort everything out and then inform both sets of parents, but now that it's come to this, I think there's no need to hide it." My straightforward words left both sets of parents silent. After a long while, Haley's mother spoke up. Seeing my firm attitude about the divorce, she stopped giving the usual lofty advice to reconcile. Instead, she focused on the division of assets in the divorce. The main idea was that, although her daughter cheated first, I had also been caught by Haley with another woman, which meant neither of us was innocent. So she only offered $50,000 in a house, claiming Haley was at a disadvantage. My mom asked how much she wanted, and Haley's mother immediately demanded half of my assets. Impossible. My mom firmly rejected. Neither side could come to an agreement, and the atmosphere was tense. Haley, kneeling on the ground like a turtle, caught my eye and looked at me pleadingly. "Rocky, I don't have a job. Divorcing you would be a dead end for me. Just think of the 10 years we've spent together." She didn't finish her sentence, but I understood her meaning. Without me as her ATM, her quality of life would plummet, so she wanted me to pay more alimony. Dream on. Just then, that young boy rushed in from downstairs and plopped down next to Haley. "Uncle and Auntie, I truly care for Haley. As long as she divorces, I'll marry her, and I'll take care of her from now on." Haley's parents were caught off guard. "Why are you still here?" My mom sneered. "The adulterer is right in front of us. If it were me, I wouldn't have the audacity to ask for anything." Haley's parents' faces turned various shades of pale, and her mother was about to say something when the boy made a shocking declaration. "I haven't used protection with Haley, and she hasn't gotten her period this month. She might already be pregnant. Don't let her kneel there." Haley's face changed instantly, and she looked at me in panic. I felt sick to my stomach. When she explained everything that day, she repeatedly assured me that she had taken precautions, but it turned out she was wilder than anyone else. "Haley, I've changed my mind. I won't give you this house. If we don't divorce, just wait for me to sue you for bigamy." In the end, Haley and her parents, along with the young boy, left in disgrace. My parents sighed in disappointment, asking me what happened. I recounted everything that had transpired during this time, including clarifying the so-called cheating incident. My mom raised her hand and slapped me. "You're already managing a company, yet you're so irresponsible. If you hadn't staged this cheating scene, how could Haley's family have leverage against you? Who could have guessed Haley wouldn't agree to divorce at the time? This was all to make her give up. What are you going to do next?" "Really, Sue? Bigamy isn't that straightforward. She definitely cheated. We have surveillance cameras at home, and that adulterer was living with her here. I have video evidence. Suing her won't yield any benefits." Only then did my parents stop asking questions. Haley's family was indeed dragging their feet on the divorce, demanding a renegotiation of the assets. I simply hired the best divorce lawyer in the city to help me sue and fight this case. I'd rather give the money to the lawyer than split it with Haley. Once I handled my affairs and returned to the company, my assistant informed me that Bame, the boss from Washington, had called me many times. He said he would be in New York for a business trip this Friday and wanted to meet with me. I scoffed. That Bame boss. One moment he wanted to dodge my project, and the next, he was coming to negotiate. What was he trying to pull? Then help me set up a meeting with him. I wanted to see what he really wanted. What surprised me was that Bame came with his sister, the young woman I shared a hotel room with that day. Upon seeing me, he composedly had the young woman apologize to me. Serena, this situation arose because of you. Quickly apologized to Boss Rocky. The girl named Serena stuck out her tongue. Boss Rocky, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I was confused. Bame then explained. It was my rash decision regarding the project. That morning, I heard Serena say you used her as a shield to hurt your wife. I value family highly, so I thought you weren't fit to cooperate and decided to terminate the project. Later, I learned about your family situation from your assistant and realized I wronged you. Boss Rocky, I'm truly sorry. Only then did I understand the reasons behind the project interruption. I was momentarily speechless. I wanted to be angry, but Bame's apology was sincere. He repeatedly assured me that he would bear the losses caused by the project interruption. I thought about forgiving him, but I felt it was frustrating that merely based on Serena's casual comment, he terminated my project without an explanation. But on the bright side, restarting the project was more beneficial than not. After all, making money is good, isn't it? It could be considered good news among a series of recent troubles. He also explained why Serena was in my room that day. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. The event organizers had placed Serena's room next to mine. I was so drunk that night, I stumbled into my room and collapsed into bed without closing the door. Serena was also drunk and climbed into bed without turning on the lights. Fortunately, we were both passed out. Otherwise, with Bame being such a protective brother, it could have turned into a real mess. Once the knot was untied, I played the gracious host and took Bame and Serena around New York for a few days. Bame returned to Washington first, but left Serena behind as the project liaison. I had no choice but to set her up with a temporary workspace at the company. This young lady, the daughter of a wealthy family, was very curious about the story between Haley and me, constantly asking questions during breaks. Just when I was feeling down from the failed mediation with Haley before the lawsuit, I couldn't hold back and snapped at her. Are you really this curious about other people's privacy? Can you please have some boundaries? Serena was taken aback. She stared at me blankly, and a few seconds later, her face went from red to purple and finally to blue. With tears in her eyes, she kicked me. Scumbag. Then she ran away. As a result, she didn't show up the next day. I tried calling her, but her phone was off. It was Bame who proactively called me to say his sister had returned to Washington, which relieved me. Truly a spoiled princess. Her temper was quite something. With the divorce lawsuit officially underway, I no longer had time to think about Serena. Haley and I were a classic case of teenage love that led to marriage. Yet, we still ended up in court, each of us pointing fingers at the other. In just a few months, I witnessed the ugliest side of the person I once loved. Sometimes I thought about whether I should pay to find peace, so that at least the Haley of my past could remain a good memory in my heart. But then, looking at the empty bottles piling up at home, I felt unfair to myself. I'm a man. Everyone thinks men should be magnanimous and not hold grudges against women, but I'm a person too, and when hurt, can't I repay wrong with wrong, or at least address it directly? If I don't seek justice for myself, who will care for me? With that mindset, I persevered in the lawsuit against Haley. I had plenty of evidence of her cheating, while she kept trying to smear my name, claiming I cheated first, but couldn't produce any concrete proof. Moreover, the house was fully paid for by me, and Haley hadn't worked these years, relying solely on me to support the family. Ultimately, the court ruled that I would compensate Haley $50,000. Haley was dissatisfied and filed a few more lawsuits, all of which ended in her defeat. The court finally ruled for our divorce, and it had been more than half a year since I filed. Fortunately, everything settled down in the end without any major losses. After receiving the divorce certificate, I immediately sold the house we had lived in. After giving Haley the $50,000, I completely blocked her. When my friends learned about my divorce, they insisted on throwing me a divorce party. This bunch of idiots poured drinks into me relentlessly. Even with my impressive alcohol tolerance honed in business, I couldn't withstand their onslaught. I ended up blacking out completely, losing track of everything. The next day, I woke up late. You're finally awake. A plaintive female voice came from beside me. My brain, still hazy from the blackout, kicked back into gear as I looked over to see a young woman on the other side of the bed. Serena, why are you here? I instinctively threw back the covers. Holy shit, unlike last time when I was wearing pants, this time I was completely naked under the blanket. Rubbing my eyes to focus on Serena, I saw she was wrapped in the blanket, but her shoulders were exposed. My mind exploded. This? We had sex after drinking, she said softly. What nonsense. A man who is drunk to death wouldn't react. You have to take responsibility. What the hell? I had just come out of a marriage and didn't want to step back in. If you don't take responsibility, I'll tell my brother, and you can forget about taking on any projects from our family. My brother will ruin you. Seeing that I still wouldn't speak, Serena finally got anxious and started to cry. Are you even a man? I've chased you this far, and you don't have a word to say? At least let me get dressed first. Serena and I sat in the living room, staring at each other. Her eyes were still a bit red. She looked pitiful, like a little dog about to be abandoned by its owner. I sighed. You're still young. I'm only 4 years younger than you. Cough, cough. I've been divorced. What does that matter? You don't have any kids, and your ex-wife was the one at fault. Looking at her stubborn expression, I could only say, I had a more than 10-year relationship with my ex-wife, and we ended up at this point. She made me lose faith in love and marriage. I don't know how long it will take me to rebuild that faith, or if I can at all, but I know that accepting you right now wouldn't be fair to you. Serena's initially downcast eyes suddenly brightened. So, I still have a chance, right? Can you understand what I mean? I'm rejecting you, she giggled, suddenly standing up and turning my head to kiss my cheek. Just wait, I'll make you rebuild that confidence. When the time comes, you better not reject me. 3 years later, I decided to relocate the company's headquarters to Washington. Before leaving, I treated my friends in New York to a farewell dinner. As I explained the reason for the move, everyone exchanged knowing glances. Wow, so you finally got together with that Serena, huh? One friend, grinning from ear to ear, said, if I hadn't made the split-second decision to push the drunk in you towards Serena, you might still be single. By the way, you better let me be the best man at your wedding this time. Exactly. Everyone cheered. After a hearty meal, we stumbled out, only to witness a couple arguing outside the bar. The woman, visibly pregnant, was confronting her husband about cheating. The man was drunk and kept clinging to a heavily made-up princess. After the wife tugged at him a few times, he lost his patience and slapped the pregnant woman to the ground. One of my friends exclaimed, "What the hell? That jerk actually hit a woman, especially a pregnant one." Another friend frowned and pulled him back, saying, "Wait, don't you think they look familiar?" I turned to look at the woman on the ground, clutching her belly and cursing while crying. And the more I looked, the more familiar she seemed. It was Haley. Although she had gained weight and looked tired due to the pregnancy, I could still see traces of her former beauty in her plump cheeks. And the man hitting her was none other than the college student she had lived with. Everyone looked at me. "Rocky, what do you think? Should we help or not?" I quietly called 911 and reported that a pregnant woman was being assaulted. This would be the last time I helped Haley. We stood a little distance away, waiting for the police to arrive before we left. On the way, a mutual friend of Haley and me suddenly began talking about her life over the past few years. Apparently, during the time we were separated and in the midst of the lawsuit, Haley had indeed become pregnant. The young guy insisted on marrying her, and she agreed in a moment of emotional weakness. After our official divorce, she was already showing and couldn't hold a wedding, so they just got their marriage certificate and moved in together. Unfortunately, the young man had just graduated from college, and with no stable job, he had to support a pregnant Haley. They struggled to find a landlord willing to rent to them. After a while, Haley lost the baby, and she had to undergo an abortion. The guy, a PE major, couldn't find a job in his field and ended up working as a trainer in a gym. Somehow, he ended up with a rich woman. When Haley found out about it, fearing he would leave her, she tried to get pregnant again to tie him down. The rich woman, seeing that the guy was young and had a wife, kicked him out. The young man, furious, and Haley had all kinds of arguments, leading to another miscarriage. To please him, Haley even used the $50,000 I gave her to help him open a gym. But then the pandemic hit and he lost a fortune. In short, her life had been a roller coaster ride over the past few years. In the end, my friend sighed, if she had just been honest and stayed with you, she could have been a wealthy lady by now. Honestly, Rocky, seeing Haley now, do you still have any feelings for her? I didn't look back at Haley for a second, instead laughing and cursing, "Get out of here! I've moved on long ago." The end. If you like Kitten's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.